We look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
Not Rachel Vigil, obviously. Jake Shapiro filling in for Rachel with my boy Jesse Montano, who is from Guerrilla Sports, covers all the latest and greatest with the Colorado Avalanche. And I'm just going to start right away with this, Jesse. I saw today that Elliot Friedman reported in 32 Thoughts, his podcast, that the Avalanche knew for quite a while that Bowen Byram was going to be on the move because he wanted to be the number one defenseman somewhere else. Their big move at the deadline comes in a move where they get rid of Byram, bring in Middlestad, and then basically get Walker as his replacement.
Yeah.
What do you think about that move? Is that going to be enough to get them into cup contention again?
Yeah, so it's funny because I had actually heard since a couple of years ago that long term, right? This wasn't like something that was immediately pending, but that long term Bowen Byram probably wouldn't stay with the Avs because it was kind of known that he was eventually going to want to crack it, being the guy, right? He wanted to be Cale Makar somewhere else. I thought maybe last summer you would see a situation where the Avs decided to move on from Devon Taves and say, we're going to, put Bowen Byram next to Cale Makar long term. As soon as the Avs signed that Taves deal, I think it was all but written that Bowen Byram was going to be on the way out. So I'll kind of work backwards on your question here. When I saw the Sean Walker deal, my first thought was, okay, well, there's your future Bo replacement. And I think it was a really, really good pick, in terms of a player that to bring in to replace Bo. He doesn't have the same ceiling. He is a little bit older, but he fits the exact type of player that the Avs wanted there. Let's be honest. If Bo hits that ceiling, he's probably kind of you don't want a player of that caliber sitting on your second pairing, kind of not playing power play, kind of picking up the scraps in terms of minutes. I think Sean Walker is a perfect fit for that role that they're looking for where Bowen Byram was playing. And then Chris McFarland said it right after the trade deadline, Jake. You probably heard him. They weren't moving Bo for a guy that was in the back nine of his career or was going to be a rental. If you're moving a player like Bowen Byram, it's going to be for a young player that still has a lot, still has their prime ahead of them. Casey Middlestad is RFA at the end of this year, so the team's got a little bit of control. Really, for them to move a player of Bowen Byram's caliber, I actually think you couldn't have done it any better. Anything less than what they would have done or what they did, I think would have been a little bit disappointing, maybe even a little bit underwhelming. You get a 25-year-old center that's going to come in and play behind Nathan MacKinnon for a long time, and you got a guy that's probably typecast for that second pairing on the back end a little bit better. I think they did a great job. You got Bo to a place where he has an opportunity to succeed. Things are already going well for him. I think it was a true, hockey trade. Both teams got exactly what they needed.
Yeah. So you look at the deals, and obviously there's the benefit in the future of Casey Middlestad's likely to be a long-term Av. I wrote about it on denversports.com the day it happened.
Yep.
But did that benefit them enough going forward this season? Did they take a step back by getting rid of the talented Bowen Byram, or do you think they're in a better place? Obviously, the results since the deadline would hint maybe that they're a stronger team. Granted, they also got Valerian Nichushkin back, which is a huge for them.
It helps. Yeah. It's funny because, you're right. Sean Walker this season, if you're an analytics guy and stuff like that, has outperformed Bowen Byram a little bit. But you're right, Jake, let's be honest here. I think everyone agrees that probably even right now and beyond, Bowen Byram is the better player there. What I think they did was maybe if you got, let's even just for the sake of the argument, say you got a little bit worse on defense, right? By losing Bowen Byram, for the sake of the argument. What the Avs were able to do and what having a player like Casey Middlestad allows them to do with their forward depth and kind of moving guys down, they feel like they have all four lines again, like they did 2 seasons ago. The depth is really what kind of killed them last year, and I think it's what's led to a lot of inconsistencies this year. They brought in Ryan Johansson thinking he was going to be the second-line center. Well, by the time he left town, he was the fourth-line center. All those guys that you had slated in to fall below Ryan Johansson were suddenly playing up in the lineup. What the Avs did at the deadline feels like they gave themselves much better depth. They're a much more complete team. So maybe while they lost, maybe they moved out the best player in all of the trades that they executed by losing Bowen Byram. the players, the quality of players that they got back, the number of players they got back, I think have made them a much better team, top to bottom. I said it on deadline day. I really do think people were starting to maybe question Chris McFarland a little bit because, Joe Sakic had everything he touched turned to gold for so long. Chris McFarland came in. Those first couple moves weren't great. This deadline may have kind of reshaped his tenure so far.
People do forget McFarland was basically in the exact same role as before. He just has an elevation in title, and Joe still is overseeing things. I've long said to win a Stanley Cup, Jesse, you need to have a guy on your third line that's capable of scoring 20 goals. This year, to start the year, Ryan Johansson was a guy who wasn't even going to get 20 points as your second line center. You look at the Avs depth now, and Ross Colton is a guy who might end up scoring 20 goals this year, and he's on your third line. Casey Middlestad, obviously an improvement for them. And I do think that, and I cover the NBA primarily, but when you look at the way hockey teams are run into the postseason, Kale's going to be playing 25, 30 minutes a night. Devontae is going to be playing 22, 25 minutes a night. So do you really need 6 great defensemen when you're going to be shrinking that down to basically rotating 4? And obviously there is a case to be made that, like, could Bowen Byram give you that, like, Duncan Keith by Brian Campbell thing that the Blackhawks had, like, just 2 awesome puck moving defensemen with Kale and Bowen, but they had already made the decision to go with Devontae's. It's a good decision. No one's faulting them for that. So basically, they're dealing from a place of huge strength on their D line to improve an area of obvious need the entire time Nathan MacKinnon's been here, except for 1 year of Nazem Kadri, essentially.
100%. Yep.
The only thing I think did they not do enough there was I'm still a little bit worried about the goaltender situation, and especially because you got a little bit weaker on your defensive side, and I think the defense has propped up their goalie all year long. Is their goaltending situation enough to get them back to winning 16 games come a couple months from now?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there that the word that you just used, enough. I think their goaltending is enough. I don't think that it's exceptional. I don't think it's tops in the league. But you could even argue a couple of years ago in the playoffs, I think Darcy Kemper had a very underrated regular season, his 1 year with the Avs. But in the playoffs, that Avs defense really the team defense is really what kind of carried them through. I mean, you used multiple goaltenders at different, several different points in that playoff run. So you're right. Like the team defense is the hallmark of this group. That is what props them up. And I think the Avs are saying, hey, Alexander Georgiev, we need you to make one more save than the guy on the other end, and we'll get you the goal support. We'll give you the defensive support that we need. And since the trade deadline, and goalies are up and down, hot and cold, he's done that. I think he's capable of that. And to the point that you were kind of making about shortening up your bench, because you're right, that is what happens in the playoffs. The best players play, they get the big minutes. You're trying to fight off for however long you can to shorten that bench. But I kind of have a similar thought process with goaltending, because I think you're right. If you can't shorten that bench to those really top tier players, you're struggling anyways. I feel the same way about goaltending. When they get into the playoffs, you need Georgiev to be playing like a number one, full stop. If he's not getting it done and you're having to go to a backup for any reason, injured, whatever, it's going to be a battle for you to get it done either way. So I totally understand people wanting to see the Avs bring in a goaltender. It's been really up and down. It's been really inconsistent. My thought process with it was, if you weren't going to fully commit and go out and get a guy that you're willing to say, yes, he is competing, this is a 1A, 1B, we're looking for who our best shot is, I didn't really think it was worth it to go get just another backup, because if you're having to go to that guy anyways, some guy that you're getting on the cheap at the deadline, well, then you might as well just roll with Justus Annunen, if you're in that situation, and see what happens. So, yeah, I'm with you. Let me ask you, would you have wanted to see them go out and get a replacement for Georgiev, or kind of like what I was saying, like someone to compete, or were you wanting just a backup?
Yeah, I wanted someone to come in here and potentially take the job from Georgiev. That's where I was. I think Georgiev's has had a strong year. But I look at the NHL postseason, and with the recent admiration of the Colorado Avalanche, the teams that have a goaltender that can steal not only a game, but a playoff series are the ones that generally win the Stanley Cup. The Avs somehow won a Stanley Cup without a goalie that stole them a series. He stole them one game. I think it was like game 5 or game 6 against St. Louis in the second round. Kemper did. And beyond that, almost every single team that's made a deep run in the playoffs has had not one but 2 goalies at some point make an appearance. We did see that with the Avs, Pavel Francouz. I just don't have enough faith right now with Justus Anninen's limited experience that he's going to win you a game 4 or game 5 of a playoff series if all of a sudden, Georgiev gets hurt or Georgiev needs, a blow because he looked horrible in game 3 or something. And, I think Georgiev is good enough. He's like the word I used before, he's good enough if everyone else, but I think it's a really hard spot to try to win playoff games 5-4 or 4-3 rather than 3-2. And that's asking a lot of Nathan MacKinnon and your defense to chip in offensively. So I would have loved, and you would know the names a little bit better than I would have loved to get a guy that's almost at Georgiev's level and just say, whoever's the hot hand, we're playing that way. We've seen teams do that in the past. The Boston Bruins have done that the last couple of years entering the playoffs. The Chicago Blackhawks actually did that during their dynasty a couple different times. And you look back, the only teams that really haven't done that are teams with Jonathan Quick and the Tampa Bay Lightning with one of the best goalies we've ever seen.
Right, yeah, Andre Vasilevsky, maybe the best of all time by the time he's done, right. And honestly, Jake, like that was kind of my sentiment as well leading up to the trade deadline. Like, look, if you're going to go get in the goalie market, go get in the goalie market and go bring in a guy that is actually going to push Georgiev and say, hey, we're going with whoever the better player is. I wasn't, and again, had they done it, it would have been whatever, but I was like, going out and spending assets for a true backup, what does that do for you? You know what I mean? Like I didn't think that was worth it. So that was why I was fine with them standing pat in net. Because if you weren't going to go out and do that, which would have cost you a little bit more asset wise, right? Well, then you would have just been bringing in someone that was maybe slightly better than Justus Annunen. And I would have thought that would have been a weird use of, draft picks or whatever it was. So I'm with you. If you weren't going to go out and do that, bring in someone to truly compete, I think it was fine them standing pat. Otherwise, I really like what they did. And Nathan MacKinnon told me, let's see, what was that? Last night, 2 nights ago? I don't even know what the day is anymore. That since the trade deadline, he said there is a different vibe in that locker room. That everyone suddenly is gelling, that everyone gets along, and there's like this new sense of belief. So take from that whatever you will. That he made the comment that before the deadline, it did not always feel great in there. Now it feels awesome. So take from that whatever you will. I think the players like the moves they made. I think the players like the personnel that is brought in, and they're feeling it right now, man. I'm anxious for this game tomorrow in Edmonton. It'll be MacKinnon and McDavid. I think this group is fired up right now.
Yeah, I want to go to the other night's game in just a second. The one thing I'll add is Chris McFarland is in a strange position of, do we go all in now, or do we try to extend this window? And managing those assets is such an interesting thing. We've seen it with Calvin Booth and the Denver Nuggets. When do you want to trade your first round picks to basically, do you want to use first round picks now, or do you want to use first round picks later? How many picks do you want to save in future trade discussions? I think watching this from a KSE standpoint as a whole is really interesting, especially from Kevin Demoff coming over to now run all these organizations. When we saw the Rams go all in the NFL and basically blow their window, their long-term window for short-term success over a 3-4 year period. And you see what the Avalanche and Nuggets are doing, where they're trying to extend the window of Jokic and MacKinnon. I don't know which one's right. I just think it's an interesting thing to look at, but I do want to focus in a little bit on the other night's game. And you talk about that belief.
Let me just say real quick. Yeah. Well, just to that exact point, it was part of what I found impressive about the Casey Middlestat move, especially because you're 100% right. You do have to find a way to balance some of that stuff and keep these windows extended. And I just thought it was so key for them to find a 25-year-old player that still had team control to fill that role that they were needing to fill. It doesn't solve all of their problems going forward. They're still going to have to do this juggling act that you're talking about. But that was one thing that I thought was huge, that they didn't go make themselves older. You know what I mean? Like, getting a player that's 31, 32, and, you're really trying to say, okay, well, what can we squeeze out of this guy within these windows? Like, you got a little bit of a long-term solution there. But yes, no, sorry. Let's talk about the other night.
Yeah, so you talk about the belief in the locker room. You go down 3-0 against one of the best teams in the NHL, playing awesome hockey, the Vancouver Canucks, and they put on all the small things, and something just clicks, and all the guys start going. I don't know. Did that have an impact? Do we know if that had an impact, Jesse?
Dude, so I'm just so glad you brought that up because they started playing it, and I had this like funny thought in my head. I was like, man, what if this was like some really weird like juju thing where whenever like those certain Avs players heard that, they just kicked it up a level. And then it was a couple minutes later, they get that goal right at the end of the second, and then it was all Avs from there. I'm so glad someone else caught that.
Yeah, it seems wrong. Like, I don't know if they were doing it on purpose because it is a popular song to play in a hockey barn. Like Blink 182 is just a popular band to do. But you know, that obviously meant something to Avs players that were there, and I know only half the roster is still there from the Cup run.
Right.
But you look at the way they came back, and you look at what Nathan MacKinnon had done in that game, this last week as a whole, the entire season. He's playing incredible hockey. And again, I'm asking this because you probably know better than me. So excuse me, Avs faithful, if I'm putting my foot in my mouth. Is Nathan MacKinnon's performance this season maybe the greatest performance from a Colorado Avalanche player over a single season in the history? I mean, I'm thinking maybe Forsberg for that 1 year. There's a couple Sakic years in there, but we're really looking at it now and being like the peak of Nathan MacKinnon here might be as high, if not higher, than some names that are hanging in the rafters.
100%. So here's how much I agree with what you just said. I told someone just last week, I said, if especially if it was this season, if they're able to go the distance and do it again this season and win another cup, I said with what Nathan MacKinnon is doing on the ice, he is a Stanley Cup away from legitimately pushing Joe Sakic's legacy. You know what I mean? Like not pushing out, but like he's officially up there with the Joe Sakics, the Peter Forsbergs. There is no more, you know, especially if they get it done this season, there would be no more, well, is he on the Mount Rushmore? Is he one of, like, no, he is one of the greatest and is starting to enter the territory for the greatest Av of all time. I mean, what he's doing is truly special. He's got, you know, whatever, 18 games left to get, I don't remember what the exact figure, I think it's 12 or 13 points to set the all-time Avalanche point record. He's probably still a little bit of ways from the franchise record going back to Quebec, but no, I'm with you 100%. I thought that the group from 2 years ago that won the Cup, I thought really did start to shift the narrative a bit. And all right, well, maybe this is the you know, the true kind of golden, you know, era of, you know, what's maybe the right phrase, you know, whatever, you know, the glory days. Maybe this is the new glory days. And with what Nathan MacKinnon's doing this year, dude, I think you're right. Like, he is, this season will go down no matter what as one of the greatest individual seasons in Avalanche history. And if they get it all the way, you know, over the finish line, I do think Nathan MacKinnon will be right up there in terms of legacy with Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, and he will start to push for, is Nathan MacKinnon the greatest Avalanche player in history? It's that special what he's doing.
We're looking at it right now, and Nathan MacKinnon's at 117, which I think is like a 6-point lead in the Art Ross. Potential Hart Trophy battle coming tomorrow night against Connor McDavid, who I don't think is going to win it this year, but obviously has a bunch to his name. MacKinnon is twice finished runner-up to McDavid, so that game is going to mean a little bit more. And again, besides the Stasny and Goulet juice stats from, you know, Quebec, we're probably looking at MacKinnon as the all-time Av leading scorer and franchise leading scorer in a single season. So what he has done this year, and you know, it's just incredible. And you've got Kale too, and both of them are just continuously juicing their legacies. But by the end of the year, we could be adding 4 trophies to Nathan MacKinnon's, you know, hardware cabinet, depending on how this goes, and 4 of the most, if not the most distinguished trophies in the sport. I don't know, Norris might go ahead of Art Ross, which, you know, Nathan MacKinnon can't win the Norris. So, I'm at a point with Nate where I'm like, all right, we're going to have some serious conversations about where he belongs next to Joe Sakic towards the end of this season, depending how this goes. Joe's obviously got the added bonus of winning one as a GM, and maybe we'll see what happens here continuously. And that's honestly the thing John Elway has too. He's got that third as an executive too. just puts them to the top in Denver sports Mount Rushmore. So I think this conversation is fascinating, especially right now, Jesse, where you have two guys in the same barn who are obviously, if not the two greatest players in franchise history, like right there. But so I'm just going to finish on this note. What do you need to see from the Avs going into the postseason to like just inspire the rest of your confidence to be, okay, they're at a point where they can just roll into the postseason and we're not worried about round 1 or round 2. We're worried about what's going to happen when they go to the Western Conference Final, when they meet whoever comes out of the East.
Last thing on Nate, he has never won an MVP. Even going back to Major Junior, Jonathan Drouin actually won the MVP in their draft year. Nathan MacKinnon has never won a league MVP. He's the ultimate I don't care about individual awards guy. I think this season means something to him. I think he knows that he's the favorite right now, and I think he's going to do everything he can to get there.
See, every time I think about their junior career, I get the line from Goon, Jay Bruchelma at Halifax.
Dude, that's great. What I need to see from them going the rest of the way, man, it's a little bit of what we're seeing right now, to be completely honest. They need to get the inconsistency on the road cleaned up. That was what made them so dangerous 2 seasons ago, was that they said, we will play you anywhere. Our arena, your arena, we'll play you on the moon. It doesn't matter, and we will beat you. They haven't had that this year. They have, played very well at home at Ball Arena, and they have struggled on the road. And look, they're in the hunt to win the division. It is not a given that they are going to win the division. There is a very realistic world where they are starting this playoffs on the road, or at bare minimum, they're having to go on the road starting in round 2. They need to get the road woes figured out. They need to get some consistency away from Ball Arena. If they can finish these last couple of road trips, feeling good. I'm not saying they need to be perfect, but if the play is better, the matchups are fine, and they're in games, they're competitive in games, and they're getting some results, I'm going to feel like this is a team that can beat anybody. The NHL's in a weird spot. The cap hasn't moved for going on 4 years now. It has created an amount of parity that I have never seen in the NHL. I don't know who the front runner is. You know what I mean? Like, there is no team that is truly separated. If the Avs can get the consistency issues figured out on the road, they are as good as anybody. I think this year going into the playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, are more wide open than maybe they've ever been as a result of the fact that the cap hasn't moved since 2019.
All right, big game in Edmonton tomorrow night. Jesse, where can they follow your work so they can stay all up to date and get all the updates from Edmonton tomorrow?
Yeah, we're over on we're on X, we're on Instagram, Jesse Montano _. You can follow us at Gorilla Sports. Head on over to gorillasports.net. You can get to all of our different socials and YouTubes and all that stuff from there.
All right, our guy Jesse coming in clutch today, talking Avs, and everyone have a great weekend. You're going to hear from Rachel again on Monday, hopefully with some good updates from the Avs and the Nuggets as they're both on the road trying to stay hot.